stop looking over your shoulder and keep looking in the mirror. That's who you're competing against.
Hey everybody, it's Ben with a little surprise interim episode and a very special guest, David Begnaud of CBS News. Just what an awesome conversation. This was recorded back in December. It's very raw and frank and honest, and I didn't want to sit on it any longer. We'll get to that in just a minute. But this also gives me a chance to talk about what's ahead. Season 3 will go into development soon. I've got a lot of interviews coming up, and before long, I'm going to start letting them out each Friday. I appreciate the feedback in terms of where you guys want this podcast to go. I'll have more about that as Season 3 begins, but some new things this time around without being different, if that makes sense. And, well, look, I guess there's no harm in mentioning it. I've gotten more and more feedback and requests to include kids and parents in the podcast. And that's in store. That'll be part of Season 3. But interviews with adults living with TS will continue to be the core of this podcast because, and this is according to the feedback, adults tell me they go looking for resources and so frequently find information for kids and parents, but not as much on adulthood with TS. So the podcast will keep with that, but the show will also, I guess, have more diversity in terms of age. And that's important to me, and I think there's a lot that I can learn from it, and I know it'll serve the community at large better, because parents and kids enjoy listening to the show as well, and I think it only makes sense to welcome them into the conversation. And if I was a parent of a kid with TS, or if I was still a kid myself, I would want to participate too. So I hope all that came out the right way. Bottom line, I'm still coming to grips with how far this podcast has gotten and the good responsibility that it is. And I know there's still a lot of growth ahead as people continue to discover it. Thanks for all your emails and feedback and requests and suggestions. And another one is to include more science in the show, which I would love to do, as long as I can get the help of a referee, so to speak, from the science community. And I am planting some seeds there. And don't want to get too ahead of myself, but there's some really cool stuff ahead, and I can't wait to roll out the 3rd season soon enough. But for now, let's get to David Begnaud. If you don't know the backstory, he's a journalist for CBS News. He's known by people all over, not only because he's been a huge part of us knowing what's been happening in Puerto Rico since Hurricanes Irma and Maria. He's a champion journalist and indeed won the George Polk Journalism Award for that work in Puerto Rico. But in late 2018, he revealed that he had Tourette Syndrome, and it was a spotlight moment. It became a big story. Lots of coverage about David having TS, and it was such a great opportunity to for a new look at what TS is versus what people think it is. And as a matter of fact, Tourette Association of America President Amanda Talty, who you heard in the season finale of Season 2, she went on camera with David, to talk about it. What having TS means for him, what is TS, and we kind of pick up from there in a really wide open, raw way. He tells it like it is for him, warning if he needed a few conversational curse words ahead, nothing outlandish or anything, just, again, some frank talk about living with TS. And ultimately some massively positive messaging that's absolutely worth hearing. So, and if my voice sounds a little bit different, it's because I woke up like 20 minutes before this interview. So anyway, here's me and David Begnaud.
My name is David Begnaud. I am a CBS News correspondent. I live in New York City. I'm originally from Louisiana. I've bounced around the country as I've climbed the ladder, sort of in the hopes of really being right where I am, but currently living in Manhattan as of the end of 2018.
Journalism is my background as well, and I've spoken with some other Touretters in the news business. What attracted you to news? You said that this is where you wanted to get to position yourself. Where did you kind of start out? What kind of attracted you to journalism?
As a kid, going back to the age of 6, there's a photo of me standing in my home back in Lafayette, Louisiana, and I was watching the 6 o'clock news, and it was really one of my favorite shows to watch, The Price is Right and the 6 o'clock news. I think, if I'm being totally transparent, that I love the idea of being on television because, I mean, I think I would be, lying to you if I said, oh, I want to be a journalist. I just knew that I was a really nosy kid. And I think it had something to do with, these people are telling the news and I want to tell the news. I was insatiably, I was obsessively curious is what I'm trying to say. And I don't know. I think something with the news related to that. But at the end of the day, this started when I was a kid. I wanted to do it. I've never wanted to do anything other than what I'm doing. I've never had another professional dream. I mean, look, if I could sing, I'd have been a country music singer. But other than that, journalism is what it's been for me.
So it's funny, and not to superimpose my experiences on yours, but Tourette syndrome really has shaped the person I've become, and I've always felt that people can kind of read it on me, even if they may identify something. It may not be Tourette syndrome, but they might sense that something is different or weird about me in a way that I've always been uncomfortable with. And there were plenty of times that I had to go on camera as a news reporter when I was doing these. I would be a guest on nightly news shows or like, hey Ben, what happened this week on your beat, that kind of thing. And I was always so nervous about it because I was hyper conscious about what I might present to the world via my Tourette syndrome. Were there any thoughts about that? I mean, being on camera for the first time, were there any things that you had any anxiety about?
Truthfully, Ben, I never did. I never did. And I have to be honest with you, when I reflect back listening to you say your experience now, I wonder if the reason I never did is because every experience I had with Tourette's as a child was incredibly negative.
Yeah.
I never had a positive experience. I never had an experience where someone sat down and said, don't worry about that. It's just you. Kids were just totally cruel.
Yeah.
I'm just going to tell it to you like it is.
Yeah.
Now, my parents, of course, were as loving as you'd expect. And so were any other adults. But at the end of the day, kids, which are sort of your circle, your realm of influence, were very tormenting.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was always negative. So I never really had a positive experience to sort of compare to. So what I did, my way of coping, my coping mechanism as a child was to suppress anything related to Tourette's. I didn't like to talk about it. I didn't like to think about it. I didn't like to recognize it. I didn't like to acknowledge it. I would suppress it. I would act as if it wasn't there. And when people asked me how I was, I would say, I'm great. And when I'd get home, my parents say, how was your day? I'd say it was great. And everything in my life was just rainbows and unicorn, which was total bullshit. But that was how I presented in order to cope.
There's a bit of similarity with me as well, in the sense that I was, when I was first diagnosed with Tourette syndrome, I was very young. This was in the mid-1980s. And I was open about it to the degree that I didn't know there was anything to be ashamed of, if that makes any sense. I was just too young to understand that there was any sort of, stigma or that there might be any degree of discrimination that comes along. But when kids at school got a hold of it, I mean, that is when I was like, oh, okay, so I'm going to get made fun of for this. And then when I turned, like 11, 12 years old in those sensitive sort of preteen years where you're trying to establish identity and, some sense of authority or whatever you can have of that, when you're that age, I decided I had to bottle this thing up because there's no way I can advance in life if people know that this is what I have, because it's a joke and people are going to make fun of it. I'm going to be the Tourette's guy for the rest of my life. Were you in the earliest days? I mean, even without having real positive experiences socially or anything like that, after your diagnosis, what were the conversations like, or what was out in the open for you at that time?
I don't know that I really knew anybody else who had Tourette's when I was a kid. And if I did, I can't remember. I sort of felt like I was on my own island there. And I was a tough kid to raise because I didn't share a lot about my fears or insecurities. Again, I just always acted like everything was fine. and I put up a big wall, right? And so for me, it really became an issue of just getting through the day.
Yeah.
That's all it was, you know? I think one reason news works for me is because usually I have no story waiting for me the next day.
Right.
Most of the time I do a story today and there's a clean slate tomorrow. Sometimes you're on a story that's continuing coverage and you stay somewhere for 3, 4, maybe 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
But more often than not, every day is a new story. And that sort of is similar with my life. I would just try to get through that day. And I knew, and I was comforted by the fact that the next time the bell rang, the next day, it was somewhat of a clean slate. Because most of the time as a child, I felt like I was on my own island. And what I started to do was seek out adults who I could relate to.
Yeah.
Because I recognized that in adults, there was less judgment. I was an old soul as a child.
Yeah.
Still am, I guess. And I don't know if that is innate, or I don't know if that was fostered by really the loneliness that I felt growing up. And really been, the more I think about this, the more I think Tourette's is, quite frankly, to blame for the fact that I never became good at making friends.
Right.
I was never good at that because I didn't have many. And still today, I think I sometimes wonder if I could be a better friend, right? More attentive, more of everything that a friend could be if I had sort of learned some of those skills early on. And look, I'm being brutally honest with you here.
Yeah.
Because I want to tell it to you just like it was. And I've said this before, and I want to say it again. I do not feel like a victim. I don't feel wounded. My life has been richly, richly blessed. But in acknowledging the blessings that I have, I don't want people to think, oh, well, look at this guy, thinks he's sitting on top of the world and arguably is. Maybe I'm still climbing the ladder of what I believe is my ladder to success.
Right.
But that ladder is layered with years of pain and anxiety and insecurity, largely brought on by Tourette's. Okay. And the fact that I'm gay was like this icing on the cake.
Yeah.
That made it even tougher, right? When you're a kid in the South, in the, Bible Belt of Catholicism.
Yeah.
And, you've got tics and you make sounds in your mouth and your eyes twitch and you dart your head to the right. And by the way, you're a little different because you're gay. It was a gumbo of stares.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And again, today, actually, it's my secret sauce. It's what makes me unique, and I'm not afraid of being who I am. And the fact that I'm willing to tell you all of this, not really caring who hears it, is an acknowledgement to myself that I'm no longer living in that realm of insecurity and anxiety. I've been able to move forward thanks to the counseling of mentors, and a lot of thoughtful processing on my own to say, David, it's who you are, it's what you do, and sharing some of this and revealing some of that insecurity is what will help connect you to others.
So you've said a few things that really kind of hit me in the stomach, especially when you talked about wondering if you can be a better friend, or have social skills that would, it's just, these are things I think all the time, even when I'm hanging out with my best friend in the world, since high school. That's something I think all the time, that, he's way better at social situations than me. He can navigate these social situations. He can work a room, he can operate, he can talk. And I'm just kind of standing there kind of quiet, waiting for him to introduce somebody to me, like, hey, this is my friend Ben, then we shake hands, we talk for a minute about what we do, and then that's about it. And I feel like I do kind of jump from stone to stone that way. And it's weird. I had never really thought about it in the front of my mind in such a way until now, even though I think I am always thinking that when I'm hanging out with people. I'm generally very, very quiet, which may be at odds with the impression that people get from me when I am on this podcast, because I'm a fast talking type person. I kind of move through syllables at this breakneck pace. And, but yeah, when I am in a social situation, I do have this, and I think it is because of the awkwardness of growing up and certain things that I did kind of pull myself away from, social situations or try to create a situation where I didn't have to go out and play with my friends at any particular summer. I would just stay inside, play computer games and that sort of thing. And it was half self-imposed, half what I couldn't control, if that makes any sense. And then trying to understand who I am and what my preferences are and who am I going to like, who are my friends going to be, and absolutely finding more solace with adults and relating to them. I think that sort of turned me on to books and things like that when I was a kid. So there's so many great things that came out of it, but so many things that I live with today that, and again, I'm completely proud of having Tourette syndrome. That was not the case before 2018, but just acknowledging who I am. I mean, it's just 2018 was a very transformative year for me, and I feel like 2019 will be as well, just because I've been open about having Tourette syndrome. And on that note, you were open about being gay before talking about Tourette syndrome in the public space. Is that correct?
I was. 2018 kind of became a year of all these coming outs for me. In fact, I said to my boyfriend at one point, I'm done coming out. Like we need to close the door and stay in the closet. Whatever the hell else we got to come out about, which is just a joke. But look, I came out to my family when I was 24 years old, But I hadn't come out to the audience. Now, listen, I don't think it was breaking news to a lot of people. Some folks it was. But I was just tired of I never really posted a photo of my boyfriend and I that looked like I was in a relationship, so to speak. And it was Pride weekend in New York, and I was flying to Texas for a story, and I wanted to post a picture. And it was us looking at each other at a restaurant on my birthday, clearly, affectionately, intimately staring into each other's eyes. And I thought, if you post a photo like this, clearly people are going to be like, okay, and what's that? And so I thought I'm going to make the post as pithy as possible. And so I wrote something to the effect of reporting the truth includes sharing my own. And I thought, I don't need to say another word. And I didn't. And then I got zero blowback, none, zilch. And with this Tourette's in coming out, I've gotten zero, none. It's been shocking that you haven't gotten any, because in the world I work in, there are haters and critics and miserable folks all over the country. Right?
Absolutely.
Most of the time, these people speak from a place of pain, because their own lives are insufferably miserable, which is why I'm able to laugh about it half the time if somebody... But it just reminded me that when you speak from a place of pain or insecurity or anxiety about yourself, you often unlock and allow others to say, well, here's my story, which is what has happened. From reporters who have come out and said, I have Tourette's, and now I'm going to tell my story because you told yours, to parents and patients, to physicians, to musicians, to entrepreneurs, to colleagues of mine.
Yeah.
A few from CBS who've said, I have Tourette's, who I never knew about, to a friend of mine who was driving with me recently and said, I have a version of Asperger's. I mean, the week has been nothing but people coming forward and saying, I feel comfortable now sharing my story. And I thought, what a validation, right? What a validation that this was the right thing to do. It doesn't make me any less of who I am. Doesn't change what people think about what I do. If anything, it warms people up to me. And if I sound a little insecure, it's not that I'm insecure, but there's always this child lurking in the back of me that I always want to say to that kid, if only you'd have realized this at 7 or 10 or 12.
Yeah.
That revealing a little bit of yourself and opening up might endear a couple more friends to you.
I mean, it's so powerful, and I think the same thing all the time. Having not really opened up about my Tourette syndrome to anybody except for a couple, very select people in my life until I was 37 years old, which was last year, and it really has opened up the world for me. Everything feels much more relaxed to me. I feel less anxiety. I feel less worry when I'm walking down the street. And this is just a very generic example or thought exercise, but walking down the street, I don't have that hyper consciousness that I was describing before. It's just, if I'm ticking in public, it's kind of like, so what? I don't feel it's exhausting to suppress all that. And just lifting that away has, like I said, 2018 was a year of transformation on a lot of levels. And that's what I think is leading the charge. And I've connected with so many new people who have so many stories that are so similar to mine, yours included. And it kind of reshapes the world. And I love it. And I do ask myself the question all the time, what if I had done this 15 years ago? Or what if I had done this? What if I had never bottled it up? I mean, what would life have been like? And I guess at the same time, it's the kind of thing is, if you're happy where you are, it's because of everything you've been through. And, so maybe I shouldn't question it, but I do run through it all the time. And I do encourage others to make decisions about being open with Tourette's for themselves. And, you don't have to talk with your friends about it. You don't have to do anything you don't want. Just wait for the right point in your life. But
well, it's the same. It's the same as when it comes to coming out. Like when I came out as gay or came out as having Tourette's. I really would encourage everyone to know that you will do so when the time is right for you.
Absolutely.
And really, if the time doesn't feel right for you, then what my hope is that you will be encouraged by this conversation, and that you will start your day or end your day dreaming of what it's going to be when you do tell your story and how much better it's going to be. So today may not be your day. That's okay. Right. Your day is coming, and there will be many resources and many people to connect to. But if this is still your private secret, so to speak, then that's okay. Just take inspiration from this conversation and know that when the day feels right for you, you're going to wake up, you're going to tell somebody, and it's going to start a domino effect of freeing you from this internal anxiety that you've lived with.
So can you talk about the day when you decided, how did this come up for you? How did we get here?
Well, I didn't really want to talk about it. Again, my family, boyfriend, classmates for that matter, and mentor knew. But I did an interview with the magazine at the University of Louisiana in Lafayette, where I went to college. I, this year, gave the commencement address at the graduation and was honored as the outstanding alumni, and the university magazine wanted to do a cover profile. And so they called me and we did it. It was going to be, a puff piece, as we call it, kind of like a feel-good ho-hum puff piece. And we finished the interview and I could tell the reporter was happy and I was happy with how it went. But as any good reporter is looking for some kind of nugget that, hasn't been revealed yet. But he wasn't fishing, but I could tell he was like, okay, this is fine. And he said, could I call some of your mentors? And I said, well, certainly. Here are their numbers. And he called one. It's the woman who gave me my shot in television. And during the course of the interview, she said to him, I think one of David's biggest successes is overcoming Tourette's. So like any good writer would do, he called me back and he said, you don't have to talk about this. But he said, if you so choose, I really think this could be something that would be powerful. And I really didn't hesitate. And I said to him, let's go there. But if we go there, I need you to promise me one thing, that you won't sugarcoat anything of what I tell you. But also you won't over dramatize and overplay it, because there was plenty of drama in it. And he gave me his word and he kept it. So the article came out, and then People magazine ended up picking it up. And the rest is history. And so that's really how the conversation came about.
And so since then, there have been spots on TV with Amanda from the Tourette Association. I mean, there's been a lot of good stuff out there that I think is empowering for all ages, and for parents of people who have Tourette syndrome as well. So you've heard from other journalists who have TS? I mean, they've been reaching out to you?
It's amazing, Ben. We offered it up to the affiliates, right? So CBS News said to our affiliates around the country, David will be available for 1 hour to talk about this. Yeah. We had so many requests, we couldn't get everybody in within the hour, and we did interviews every 5 minutes. And 2 of the people who interviewed me had Tourette's. It was a weatherman in Little Rock and another journalist out west who I don't want to disclose where or his name, so as not to tell his story before he's ready to. But I was overwhelmed by the fact that, these, and you could tell how freeing it was then for them to talk about it and for them to ask me questions about it. And there's another man in Ohio who's about to do television. Local news has these sweeps periods every year, February, May, July, and November. And in February sweeps, this journalist is going to tell his story. And so he wants to interview me as sort of, he wants to tell the audience, I feel compelled to tell mine after David Begnaud came forward and told his. And Ben, that's why I believe that's my purpose. I really do. Because talking about this is embarrassing, okay? And it's painful. Like I don't get, you seem like a really enjoyable guy and I'd love to meet you. But like this phone conversation I'm doing, not because I terribly love it, but because I want to help others, right?
Yeah.
That's what I feel is my purpose, is to help others who either aren't ready to say, I know what you're going through. I'm here for you. I hear you. I will talk ad nauseum about what life is like to give you comfort. And to the person who's ready to talk, to give them hope of what it could be. And to the person who hadn't even thought about either talking or keeping it quiet, but just wakes up every day with the anxiety and the exhaustion that comes with TS, I want them to know that look where I got. And whatever is the top of your career, it is possible. Because Ben, Tourette's has not stopped me from anything. Not anything. Okay? Nothing. If anything, revealing it has simply made my colleagues walk up to me and put a hand on my shoulder and say, I can't tell you how touched I was by hearing your story. And my cousin has this, or I have that, or my dad has this, or my mother has that. It's like it's creating conversations that didn't otherwise exist.
Yeah.
It's been amazing.
When you said earlier that the writer, you didn't want him to sugarcoat it or sensationalize it or over-dramatize it, I think was the word you used. That's, I think, was one of the other fears I had about opening up about my TS, was that it would not be sugarcoated, but it would be kind of a runaway topic. And the Hollywood version of it, so to speak, would sort of, I guess, tell my story for me before I could. And I think that was one of the pieces for me that kept me from being open about TS, is I didn't know how to explain it to other people in a capsule. So if I said, that thing you just noticed that you just asked me about, that's a tic, I have Tourette syndrome. And it's like my brain, the earlier version of myself, my brain would dart to, but I don't have that thing where you curse. And not even really realizing at the time, or as I was having these thoughts, that's totally not the way to approach it. I mean, I don't want to marginalize another group of people in explaining myself and trying to get myself out of the margin. And this is all to say that I'm not an expert on Tourette syndrome. I'm just an expert on what I've been through myself. Right.
Look, Ben, you're an expert at your own story. And that is every person's story. We are an expert in our own shoes, right? Telling our story. And it's what journalists want. I want everyone's individual experience of what happened to them, what they experience as it pertains to a certain story. This is our story. There's nobody better to tell the Ben story than Ben, right? And
That's
vice versa. And so I think that kind of empowerment to people is what folks like you and I need to continue serving up. Because I don't get new clothes, I don't get new shoes, and I don't get any younger talking about this. The only benefit and the sense of satisfaction comes from knowing that other people could be helped. And to the point of running away with the story, I do not want a label of Tourette's, because on the totem pole that is David Begnaud, Tourette's is not at the top.
Right.
Tourette's is 7, 8. Tourette's may not even be in the top 10. Tourette's is like the nagging little bitch that won't go away, that reminds me he's there, and we just got to work through it, right? When in reality, as a kid, I was a nagging little shit, because my Tourette's in many ways also manifests itself in an incessant inability to just sit down and just be quiet. Like, just stop. And so one of the reasons I can't watch family videos today, not that I can't, but I choose not to, is because they're too painful. Because what you hear on the video is my mother or father saying, David, don't do that. David, stop. David, sit down. David did it. David did it. And it's too uncomfortable. It's too uncomfortable.
Everything you just said, ditto. I mean, that is bullseye for me. It's funny. My dad, a few years ago, he packaged up these old. He had these old VHS recordings, and he digitized them, transferred them over to DVD. And over Christmas one year, he handed us these DVDs of these old, family memories. And I popped one in just to kind of be nostalgic for a minute, and that was one of the first places I went to. It was like, oh God, like I can't take. It's like if I met myself, I would punch myself in the face. It was just I was that obnoxious. I was that unruly. I kind of felt like I was just kind of ruining moments for my family because they couldn't get to where they wanted to be because they were always busy kind of chasing after me, so to speak. And it's kind of painful to think back at all that, but at the same time, it also makes me, I guess, realize how lucky I am.
Brother, that is my story. That is my story. And by the way, I would take that energy and that inability to just sit and be still, and that acting out that I did, and I would channel that into really the fuel booster that has become my drive in life.
Yeah.
So again,
absolutely.
as painful and debilitating as it was as a child, I believe I am where I am today because of it. That's the twisted reality of Tourette's. Yep. That's when people start calling it a blessing, right? But along my road of life, there are the things that I wish I could redo, but I don't live with regret. But I also don't sit around and watch family videos because it just is simply too painful. I would act out, Ben, because I would want to change the conversation. Because instead of the kids teasing me for being gay, which, I don't know if kids knew what being gay was at 10, but they knew that I was a little girly, or they knew that I was a little sissy, or whatever the hell they said. But you combine that with what they would say about the tics, and all I was trying to do was turn the page, change the conversation, right? And so I think the acting out brought on by the Tourette's was exacerbated by the insecurity of, I just need him to talk about something else. And I've always said that if I wrote a book, among the titles to be considered would be How Television Saved Me from Myself. Because television changed the conversation amongst my peers. And so instead of he's gay or he tics, it became, well, look at him on television. Well, he speaks well. Well, he does that way. It changed the conversation and allowed me to show a talent that people respected and admired. And I found a voice and a lane, and I truly believe God put me on this earth to do what I do. But it really saved me from myself. I cannot emphasize to you how in many ways this profession rescued me from the relentless teasing that I endured.
For the uninitiated and people who haven't seen you on TV, I assume listeners are wondering if you're if you're ticking on camera. I asked this to Ed Buckner as well, and I know you spoke with him just recently. And in his case, he's a weatherman. He's not on the camera for prolonged periods of time. Is there any tic management you have to do when it comes to presenting on TV?
No, I don't even think about it. But I also can't explain to you why I don't tick.
Right.
My father one day was watching me on television in Lafayette, Louisiana. He had come to the studio, and it was a weekend morning that I was anchoring. And in the commercial break, I was ticking, and he was watching me, and he was a good 60, maybe 100 feet away from me watching.
Mm-hmm.
And when the light came on and we went back on the air, I stopped. And he would later tell me the story with awe in his voice, really, and how he was just amazed that the ticking ceased.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that happens. I don't know what it is, but I don't know that I've ever had a tick on camera, ever, which is unbelievable. Now that's I don't know that that's entirely accurate, because sometimes I've been in the edit bay and I can hear myself. I have this tick through my nose where I breathe out. I kind of, I don't know, that's the best way to describe it. I kind of snort.
It's like a
out,
quick puff of air?
Yes.
I do the exact same thing.
Do you? Do you? Yeah,
exact same tick.
So I can hear myself in the edit bay sometimes when they're editing.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, that's a little, I guess if I were to do that on camera, you wouldn't see, you would hear that. But
right.
I can hear it in the edit bay sometimes. But the tick with my tongue or darting my head to the right, which are my other ticks, never happens on camera. Never have I caught it on camera. It's amazing.
It's funny. So that breathing tick, I've been doing that this whole time. So the microphone is definitely going to pick it up. Incidentally, the software that I use and the noise gate, which is just kind of clamps down on any noise between me speaking words at a certain volume. It usually gets mixed out in the process, so people don't necessarily hear it in the course of an interview here. But it's kind of funny how we can have this conversation, and 100% of this time I've been ticking in one way or another, in a way that would probably be imperceptible to most people who would be looking on. I mean, maybe they would hear the breathing thing or see the body motion that comes along with that little exhalation. But I do hear that really, really frequently, and I think it might be true for myself that kind of when I get into the zone of what I'm supposed to be doing, that this is live, this is now, and I got to do this, I either don't tick or I don't notice them. They don't seem to bother me. Is that true for you in other respects as well?
Yeah, I think so. If I'm in a moment where I'm really fixated on something, I show up at a store where I'm looking for this article of clothing that I'm excited to buy, or I'm putting together something as mundane as the brand new automatic vacuum that I bought last night that I stayed up till midnight assembling. I guess, I think. But the reality is, the most noticeable tics I don't think happen, but throughout this conversation, I too have been doing the exhalation through my nose, and I just realized it as I was telling you.
Is there anything I haven't asked that you think is important, or something maybe that's been missed so far in the conversations you've had since opening up about having Tourette syndrome, or what haven't we hit?
You ask my favorite question that I end most interviews with. What should I ask you that I didn't? I don't think you missed any points, Ben. I tend to be a bit of an open book. I probably should be less of. But I think one reason I'm such an open book is because I was such a closed book as a child.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I seemed to have it all rainbows and unicorns, it was anything but. I think what I would like to say is that finding a mentor can be one of the most powerful things in your life, because the mentor for me, who, God love her, is still alive today, thankfully, and still changing lives, was my English teacher my freshman year of high school, who became my speech coach, who became my mentor, who's become one of my best friends. And what she was for me was the key to unlocking the veneer that I put up in order to survive. Because I will never forget her saying to me one day, "What are you running from?" And she was the person I felt comfortable opening up to. And I think I would say to parents listening to this, you will cry yourself to sleep and exhaust yourself trying to fix a child with Tourette's. But the reality is, in time, as it was with coming out as gay, and I'm sure as it may be with any other thing that makes you special, notice I call it special,
right?
There will be moments where you put guilt on yourself because the person is not opening up to you when it's not your fault. The most powerful thing to unlocking who I was this mentor, Josette Surratt. I felt, for whatever reason, comfortable opening up to her. And she literally is what has been the force that has peeled back my onion just continuously and consistently. And that doesn't take anything away from my parents, who were the salt of the earth, remarkable people. But it's sometimes easier to open up to strangers than it is your own blood, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so to patients, I would say find a mentor. To parents, I would say don't be offended by what the mentor can do. That was very powerful in my life.
Well, so what's the road ahead for you? I mean, you are kind of a new hero when it comes to Tourette syndrome, and the number of people who've reached out to you and said, that this has been such an isolating world, but now there's someone who, you're in my profession and you have Tourette syndrome. I'd love to be where you are someday. I know it's possible. But what have you already kind of planned that out in your head of sort of what your world with Tourette syndrome is going to be like?
No, it's interesting to hear you ask that question, because I've never thought of what my life with Tourette's would be like, because I never allowed Tourette's to have that much of a priority in my life.
Yeah,
I just haven't. I walked in the house the other day, Ben, and I was ticking really bad with my head, and I was holding bags, and I was stressed, and I sat down and I gave thanks for the people who've come forward to tell me their stories over the last week, because one of them, I remember being a story of a girl just saying, I'm exhausted by it. I'm exhausted. Yeah. And I thought, I never thought about that, believe it or not. So I sat down on the couch and I said to myself, okay, I'm exhausted and my neck hurts. So just focus on your breathing, breathe for a minute. And I sat there for about 5 minutes and I stopped ticking and everything was fine. And so this has been very healing for me to hear other people's stories, because I never realized that, yes, it's also exhausting when I'm in the throes of a tic that's just getting worse, exacerbated by stress. But I don't allow Tourette's to have a seat at the table. It doesn't. It really doesn't. It's like, Tourette's is the same pain that I feel. Tourette's is kind of like exercise. Like, I got it. I need to always do it. I don't like to really engage with it, but it makes me better. It makes me healthier. It makes me more focused. You're like, okay, Tourette's is there, but it's never going to have like a platform in my life. You know what I mean? It's not a clarion call for me. It's not. It's just, I wore black jeans yesterday. I might wear blue today. Like, that's what Tourette's is. Like, get behind me, dude. You're not walking side by side. I am not ashamed. I'll talk about it any day to anybody. What's next for me, Ben, is a continued evolution of authenticity. Because I have learned that in life, the more authentic you become, the more you free yourself of guilt and pain and shame. And I want to continue to be the most authentic human being I am. Because, Ben, I work in a business of backstabbing, social climbing, and people who are trying to get to the top. That's just the tough man-eat-man world that I live in.
Yeah.
But what I have told people is that as human beings, it is innate for us to be jealous. But when you realize that you are a special specimen of creation, I believe in God. So when I say I believe that everyone is a special being made by God, what I mean is there's nobody who's going to do you as well as you. And when you realize that, you're going to stop trying to be like someone else, and you're going to say, no matter how much I share my secrets and my insecurities, no one's going to beat me at being me. And the more I become the most authentic version of myself, the more more I become indispensable in this universe. There's no other Ben and there's no other David. We need to settle into our own skin, not be more like him or be more like her, but be more like us. I always say to people, stop looking over your shoulder and keep looking in the mirror. That's who you're competing against. That's your competition of being the best that you can be. So what's ahead for me? I hope more preaching about that and more living that, right? To show people that I promise the road to happiness becomes self-acceptance. It's an evolution, but self-acceptance is what you want to get to. Because when you accept yourself, it's a whole lot easier for folks to warm up to you.
Thanks so much for listening. Gigantic, huge, colossal thanks to David Begnaud for taking some time out of his busy schedule to hang out with us, and I'm eager to know what you thought about this. You can discuss that at the Tourette's Podcast discussion group on Facebook. Sophia is your admin there. By the way, she's been really awesome in helping with new ideas and considerations for the podcast. Thanks to her as always, and as well to you for the support. I can't tell you how life-changing it's been for me, and just getting the chance to talk with so many other people who have Tourette Syndrome and all the listeners who get something out of it. So just keep the feedback coming. I want to make sure I get this right. Head to the Facebook group or email me at tourettespodcast@gmail.com. And we'll talk. And look for season 3 soon. Thanks, everybody. This is Ben.